Good day. Today we are celebrating the 6th birthday of the largest saltwater ecosystem. Well, why don't we take a look at this jar, at the origins of this jar, how it was made, and how the ecosystem inside changed over the past few years.
So, almost 6 years ago, I took some water and seaweed as well as sand from the North Sea. As it turned out, a starfish came along with the seaweed and was already preying on a crustacean in the container. The ecosystem was assembled in this 10-liter jar. As we saw before, there was a starfish, and as it turned out, also a little crab came with the seaweed. A day later, I saw another little stowaway, a teeny tiny crab, about 2 millimeters big. There were also a few gamerids as well as a bunch of tiny critters. A month later, this crab had grown quite a bit. The amount of small crustaceans and paramecia and other small critters had grown a lot as well. Most of the sea lettuce started to die at this point, possibly due to a lack of water movement. Some of the other algae, however, like this algae ball and this red algae, Gracilaria vermiculophila, had started growing. Like I said earlier, this tiny crab, which is probably a Leocarcinus arcuatus, has grown quite a bit. Or actually, it has grown a lot, because this individual is the same one as the really tiny one. The other crab actually died, unfortunately, shortly after the start of the experiment. This crab has been feeding on pretty much everything it could find, like algae, microbes, little crustaceans, and maybe even the dead crab. Look at how big it became in just a year. At this point, a mysterious tunnel appeared. Another month later, the red algae had grown even more, and the number of tiny critters had increased even more. Some new sea lettuce was starting to form on the glass. And the mysterious tunnel has now become 2 mysterious tunnels. They are the home of this spionid worm. It has 2 tentacles, which it uses to build a tube, by grabbing sand and crushed shells with its tentacles and cementing them together with mucus, thereby building a protective home for itself. When the ecosphere was 4.5 months old, the Gracilaria vermiculophilae was slowly spreading throughout the entire jar. The sea lettuce that didn't die quite early on seemed to be doing fine, and the newly formed pieces on the glass were slowly growing. The spionid worm caught a small crustacean. Our little 10-legged friend was doing marvelously, the king of the jar. Here, if you look closely, you can see a bit more of the worm's body, apart from just the tentacles. Still busy building that tube. There have always been some nematodes, the tiny white wiggly worms, in this ecosystem, but their population has really grown a lot after 4.5 months. Everything was going really well in this ecosystem. But then, when the jar was 5 months old, I returned from a holiday only to find the lifeless body of my crustaceous friend betwixt the algae in the glass encased world on my windowsill.
Travel with peace of mind with our service guarantee. Your next holiday trip starts with trip.com.
Algae in the glass encased world on my windowsill. 5 months earlier, it came into this ecosystem as a stowaway in some of the algae. It was only a millimeter or two in size and mostly swimming around, as it was still in the zoolarvae stage. Over the next few months it ate, grew and pooped non-stop and made this jar its home. Until now. Because he's dead now. I'm still not sure why, but my hypothesis is that he died during a failed molt. Maybe because there was too little calcium in the system, a lack of food or oxygen, or too high a concentration of ammonia or nitrites seems less likely, as it was doing perfectly fine up until this point and none of the other animals seemed to be affected. In any case, it was a major event in the history of this ecosystem and I still miss him. Maybe it's a comforting thought that the large majority of crabs don't reach adulthood, but this one sure did. Just before the ecosystem turned a year old, there was a massive heat wave, killing most of the algae, resulting in the ecosphere looking like this a year after it was made. Luckily, the smaller animals and other organisms seem to have survived the heat wave, as well as the death of most algae, which is remarkable because less algae means less food and less oxygen, and a large increase in rotting organic matter, releasing all kinds of toxic compounds. A direct result, I think, from all those algae dying is the emergence of cyanobacterial colonies, like the dark green patch in the middle of your screen. A bit further back you can see two tentacles sticking out of the sand from, you guessed it, a spionid worm. It was interesting to see it again because I hadn't seen it in 8 months. And then I saw two more. There were actually 3 spionid worms present in the jar after a year. The crab's body had been completely processed at this point, eaten by everything that wanted to eat it, and its shell dissolved. Even though most algae died during the heat wave, some of it was luckily still alive. An entire year later, when the ecosystem was 2 years old, most of the macroalgae had been decaying, and the entire surface of the substrate was covered in a carpet of mostly green string algae. There were large white paramecia and smaller red paramecia, little crustaceans, a marine tardigrade, and mysterious tentacles. Either the tentacles of a spionid worm or of a different organism. Or these could have been small worms. I don't really know. So, this is what the ecosphere looked like at the beginning, after a month, after 2 months, after 4 months, after 5 months, after a year, and after 2 years.
That was the last you saw of this jar, 4 years ago now. Oh my. Let's take a look at how it's doing now.
Well, this is what it looks like after almost 6 years. You'll notice that it doesn't look that different since the last update. The only difference being that the macroalgae has decayed a little bit more. 4 years ago we saw that a carpet of green algae was forming, covering the sand. I'm not sure how well you can see it on the video, but nowadays there's also large patches with brownish reddish string algae growing on top of the sand. At least, I think it's a brownish reddish color, but I would like to remind you that I am colorblind, so take my color descriptions with a grain of salt. As you can see from all the bubbles in the carpet of algae, the algae are very productive. They've been growing and spreading over the past few years, of course, and are also producing loads of oxygen, hence the bubbles. There's also new algae growth forming on the glass. You might think that all the macroalgae is by now dead or dying, but that's actually not the case at all. All around the jar you can find these tiny green worm-like structures, which are actually new macroalgae growth. I'm not 100% sure which species, or even like 60% sure, but structurally it looks like Gracilaria vermiculophilae. Here you can see another piece. I tried filming some of the copepods I saw swimming in the water column, but it was really difficult. I'm afraid this was the best I could do. This is so difficult to film, but you have to believe me. There are copepods in here. Please, believe me, you have to. Now, I was able to film some of the smaller critters that weren't living in the water column, but rather on structures like the sand, algae and also the glass wall. Nonetheless, I'm going to go really fast and dismiss this ecosystem as nearly dead.
Whoa, 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 not so fast. It's easy to dismiss the ecosystem as nearly dead, but I don't think that's fair. Why don't we,